Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're going on a deep dive into Odisha's hidden Buddhist secrets.
Mm,
You might be thinking, Odisha and Buddhism,
yeah,
but trust me, recent discoveries there are changing our understanding of history and revealing Odisha's crucial role in the spread of Buddhism throughout Asia.
absolutely.
It's like finding a missing piece of a giant historical puzzle.
These findings, particularly those at the Ratnagiri site, are like uncovering a lost chapter in the story of Buddhism. And yeah, you're right. This isn't just some obscure historical footnote.
Okay, so let's get right into it. Odisha. Not exactly the first place that comes to mind when you think of ancient Buddhism, is it? We usually hear about places like Bodh Gaya or Sarnath, but Odisha seems to have flown under the radar.
Exactly. While Buddha himself didn't visit Odisha, it was far from being a passive player in the spread of Buddhism.
Oh.
Yeah, the seeds were planted early on, and it ultimately became a vibrant hub of Buddhist activity. What's really intriguing is that recent archaeological discoveries suggest its influence might have been even more widespread than we previously thought.
That's what I find so fascinating about archaeology. It's like we're constantly rewriting history as we unearth new evidence. So how did Buddhism initially gain a foothold in Odisha?
Well, legend has it that two merchant brothers from Odisha, named Tapasu and Balika, were among Buddha's earliest disciples. They encountered him soon after his enlightenment and are believed to have taken his teachings back to their homeland.
Interesting. So it was kind of a grassroots movement with ordinary people playing a key role in spreading the word.
Precisely. But it was Emperor Ashoka's invasion of Kalinga, which is present-day Odisha in 261 BCE, that really changed the game. As you know, the brutality of the Kalinga War deeply affected Ashoka, leading to his profound transformation and conversion to Buddhism.
Ah, Ashoka. The emperor who went from a ruthless conqueror to a champion of peace and nonviolence. Definitely a dramatic turning point in history. You got it.
So Odisha played a crucial role in this pivotal moment. It wasn't just a backdrop, it was the catalyst for Ashoka's transformation and, in a way, for Buddhism's journey eastward. Are there other historical figures who can shed light on Odisha's Buddhist past?
Centuries after Ashoka's impact, another key figure brings Odisha's Buddhist world into focus. The Chinese Buddhist monk and traveler Xuanzang. Remember him?
Of course. He's famous for his epic pilgrimage to India in the 7th century AD. Didn't he leave behind detailed accounts of his travels, almost like a historical travel blog?
Exactly. And those writings offer incredibly valuable insights into the places he visited, including, potentially, Ratnagiri. Scholars believe that one of the places Xuanzang described in his chronicles might actually be Ratnagiri.
Hold on, Ratnagiri. Is that the site where they've discovered that giant Buddha head and other amazing artifacts? The one that's changing how we view Odisha's Buddhist history? That's the one. Ratnagiri was a major Buddhist learning center that flourished between the 7th and 10th centuries AD. It's so significant that some scholars even compare it to the more famous Nalanda University.
Really? I have to admit, I always thought Nalanda was the place to be for Buddhist learning in ancient India. What makes Ratnagiri stand out?
Well, both were major centers, but Ratnagiri seems to have had its own unique character. For example, they've discovered Tibetan Buddhist texts at Ratnagiri, which suggests it might have been a hub for the Mahayana and Vajrayana traditions.
Yeah, they're a bit more esoteric than Theravada Buddhism, right? Mahayana with its bodhisattvas and Vajrayana with its tantric practices.
Absolutely.
Okay, back to Ratnagiri. What kind of things have they actually unearthed there? You mentioned a giant Buddha head, which sounds pretty impressive.
Oh, it is. They've also found a massive palm sculpture, ancient walls, and inscribed Buddhist relics, all dating back to the 8th and 9th centuries AD. These findings are providing tangible evidence of a sophisticated and flourishing Buddhist community at Ratnagiri.
This is where it gets really exciting for me. How does Ratnagiri stack up against Nalanda? Were they similar in terms of their structure and function?
While both were undoubtedly major centers of learning, Ratnagiri had some unique features. For instance, those Tibetan texts I mentioned point to the possibility that it might have been a key center for the Mahayana and Vajrayana Buddhist traditions, which, as we discussed, emphasize different paths to enlightenment compared to the Theravada tradition.
Right. Mahayana focuses on the ideal of the bodhisattva, who delays their own enlightenment to help others, while Vajrayana incorporates tantric practices for accelerated spiritual transformation. Both fascinating, but very different approaches.
Exactly. And this is where Ratnagiri's potential as a meeting point for different schools of thought becomes really intriguing.
It's like a melting pot of Buddhist ideas, which makes it all the more fascinating. What else sets Ratnagiri apart? Is there anything particularly distinctive about its art and architecture?
One of the things that really stands out is the style of the Buddha sculptures, particularly the hairstyles. They have these intricate and unique hairstyles that you won't find anywhere else in India.
Okay, now I'm picturing these elaborate Buddha hairstyles. Are there any theories about why this distinctive style developed at Ratnagiri? Was it influenced by other cultures, or was it a purely local artistic innovation?
That's a great question, and it's one that scholars are still exploring. It speaks to the creativity and artistic innovation that flourished at Ratnagiri, and it suggests that there might have been vibrant cultural exchanges happening there.
Speaking of cultural exchange, Odisha was also a major maritime power in ancient times, wasn't it?
In fact,
I've read about its extensive sea trade routes, but I've never really connected those dots to the spread of Buddhism.
but that's a crucial connection to make. Odisha's maritime prowess was a key factor in the transmission of Buddhism to Southeast Asia. Those trade routes weren't just about exchanging goods, they were also conduits for ideas, beliefs, and cultural practices.
So we're talking about a two-way street, not just monks sailing off to spread the word, but a constant flow of people, ideas, and influences moving back and forth between Odisha and Southeast Asia.
That makes so much more sense.
Precisely. And this is where Odisha's seafaring legacy becomes really important. Think of those bustling ports filled with merchants, sailors, pilgrims. Imagine them sharing stories, beliefs, and even sacred texts, all while navigating the high seas.
Wow, it's like a whole new dimension of the story is opening up. This brings us to another point, the role of trade and cultural exchange in shaping history.
Exactly. Understanding these interconnections is key to grasping the broader historical context. It's not just about isolated events, it's about seeing the patterns, the influences, and the ripple effects that connect different regions and cultures.
This is fascinating. We've got grassroots movements, royal patronage, and now maritime trade, all contributing to the spread of Jainism from Odisha. Were there any particular dynasties that played a significant role in this? Yes. The Bhamakara dynasty, which ruled Odisha from the 8th to the 10th centuries, were great patrons of Buddhism. Their reign saw a flourishing of Buddhist art, architecture, and scholarship.
So the Bhammakaras essentially provided the fertile ground for Buddhism to truly blossom in Odisha. That's another important point, the role of specific dynasties in promoting certain religions or cultural practices.
Absolutely. Knowing the key dynasties, their contributions, and their impact on the religious landscape is crucial for understanding Indian history.
I'm already feeling like I need to add a trip to Odisha to my bucket list. There's so much to explore there, both in terms of history and culture. Before we move on to how Buddhism reached Southeast Asia, is there anything else about Odisha's Buddhist legacy that you think our listeners should know?
I think it's important to highlight that Odisha's Buddhist heritage isn't just a thing of the past. It continues to be a living tradition, with active Buddhist communities and vibrant festivals that celebrate this ancient legacy.
You mean like the Bal Yatra festival we mentioned earlier?
Oh.
The one that celebrates Odisha's ancient maritime ties with Southeast Asia?
Exactly. It's a reminder that history is not just about dates and facts. It's about living traditions, cultural connections, and a sense of continuity that links us to the past.
And it's a great example of how cultural practices can reflect historical events and relationships. Speaking of which, I'm eager to learn more about how Buddhism made its way from Odisha to Southeast Asia. But before we get into that, let's take a moment for a quick message. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back in a flash to continue our deep dive into Odisha's Buddhist secrets. And for those of you studying for the UPSC exams, don't forget to check out the original Indian Express article that inspired this episode. You'll find the link in our show notes.
All right, let's pick up where we left off and explore how Buddhism traveled from Odisha to Southeast Asia. As you might imagine, it wasn't a simple process. We're talking about a complex web of interactions spanning centuries.
Right. I'm guessing it wasn't just a matter of monks hopping on boats with scrolls tucked under their arms. It had to be more dynamic than that.
Absolutely. While monks and missionaries certainly played a role, it was a much more multifaceted process. Think about those bustling ports in ancient Odisha teeming with merchants, sailors, pilgrims, and scholars from all over. They were all part of this incredible cultural exchange.
So it's through these everyday interactions alongside official efforts that Buddhist ideas were shared and absorbed.
Exactly. Imagine those long sea voyages where sailors swap stories and beliefs, or merchants discussing philosophy and spirituality while trading goods. It was a gradual process of cultural diffusion, with Buddhism weaving itself into the existing fabric of Southeast Asian societies.
Okay, that makes sense. So what were some of the key destinations for Buddhism as it spread from Odisha? Were there specific kingdoms or empires that became important centers?
Places like Srivijaya in Sumatra and Champa in Vietnam were major hubs. They became prominent centers of Buddhist learning and cultural exchange between the 7th and 13th centuries.
Srivijaya. That name rings a bell. Wasn't it a powerful maritime empire?
You're spot on. The Srivijaya Empire controlled vital sea routes and dominated trade in the region. And guess what? They were major patrons of Buddhism, which further fueled its spread throughout Southeast Asia.
So it was kind of a perfect storm. Odisha's maritime strength, the rise of empires like Srivijaya, and a growing interest in Buddhist teachings across Southeast Asia. It's amazing how historical forces can align to shape the trajectory of religion and culture.
It really is. And this interconnectedness between political power, economic activity, and religious beliefs is something that, that anyone studying history should definitely pay attention to.
And I'm curious about how Buddhism was received in Southeast Asia. Did it just replace existing beliefs, or was it more of a blending of ideas? I imagine Southeast Asia already had its own rich and diverse spiritual traditions.
You're right, and it was definitely more of a fusion. When Buddhism arrived, it didn't erase those existing beliefs. Instead, it often blended with local customs, creating a unique synthesis of Buddhist thought and indigenous practices. We even see a fusion with elements of Hinduism in some places.
So it wasn't a case of out with the old in with the new. It was more of a gradual integration, with Buddhism adapting to the local cultural landscape.
Exactly. Think of it as a cultural tapestry where different threads, Buddhism, Hinduism, indigenous beliefs are woven together to create something new and vibrant. And this fusion of traditions is reflected in the art, architecture, and rituals of Southeast Asia.
Okay, that paints a much clearer picture. Are there any specific examples of this fusion of Hinduism and Buddhism in Southeast Asia?
Oh, absolutely. One of the most iconic examples is Angkor Wat in Cambodia. While it's primarily a Hindu temple dedicated to Vishnu, it incorporates Buddhist elements in its architecture, sculptures, and overall aesthetic.
Angkor Wat. I've seen pictures. It's absolutely breathtaking. It must be fascinating to see how these two major religions, Hinduism and Buddhism, found a way to coexist and even complement each other in a single structure.
It really is. And it's a great example of the cultural fluidity that characterized Southeast Asia. Another striking example is Borobudur in Indonesia, a massive Buddhist temple complex with intricate carvings and stupas. But you can also see traces of Hindu influences in the design and symbolism.
These ancient structures really serve as tangible reminders of the cultural exchange that happened centuries ago. It's not just about reading about history in textbooks. It's about seeing these connections come to life.
They do, and it's important to remember that the influence of Buddhism went beyond grand temples. It permeated everyday life in Southeast Asia, shaping art, literature, music, dance, rituals, and even social hierarchies.
So we're talking about a profound and lasting impact, with roots that can be traced back to Odisha. It makes you wonder how different Southeast Asia might look today if Odisha hadn't played such a crucial role.
It's a thought-provoking question. We can't rewrite history, of course, but it's clear that Odisha's maritime connections, its flourishing Buddhist centers, and its openness to cultural exchange were instrumental in shaping the religious landscape of Southeast Asia.
All right, let's circle back to Odisha for a moment. We talked earlier about those distinctive hairstyles on the Buddhist sculptures found at Ratnagiri. Do we see any echoes of that artistic style in Southeast Asia?
That's a great observation, and the answer is yes. While there are variations, you can definitely see similarities between the artistic traditions of Odisha and those of Southeast Asia. The serene expressions on the faces of Buddha statues, the elegant hand gestures, the intricate details in the robes, these aesthetic elements resonate in Buddhist art across Southeast Asia.
So those artistic connections provide further evidence of the vibrant exchange that was happening across the seas. It's like those distinctive hairstyles are a fingerprint linking Odisha's artistic heritage to the art of Southeast Asia.
Exactly. It wasn't just about transmitting religious teachings, it was about sharing artistic ideas, aesthetic sensibilities, and ways of representing the divine. These cultural connections run deep and provide valuable insights for anyone studying art history, religion, or even international relations.
It's fascinating how these seemingly small details, like hairstyles on sculptures, can reveal so much about broader historical patterns. It's like a giant puzzle, with each piece fitting together to reveal a bigger picture of cultural exchange and interconnectedness.
That's a great way to put it. And it's a puzzle that we're still piecing together today. Every new archaeological discovery, every ancient text we decipher, every cultural connection we uncover, it all adds to our understanding of this incredible story. And it's a story that has significant implications for how we view history, culture, and the interconnectedness of the world today.
This deep dive has definitely opened my eyes to the fascinating and often overlooked role that Odisha played in shaping the spread of Buddhism. It's a story that deserves to be told and understood, especially for anyone interested in delving deeper into Asian history and religious studies.
I agree. And for those preparing for the UPSC exams, this is essential knowledge. Understanding Odisha's place in Buddhist history, its connections to Southeast Asia, and the broader historical context is crucial for tackling questions related to art history, religion, and India's cultural influence on the world.
Absolutely. So for our listeners who are on that UPSC journey, take notes, pay attention to these connections, and be sure to check out that Indian Express article we mentioned. It's a treasure trove of information.
It really is. And remember, history isn't just about memorizing names and dates. It's about making those connections, understanding the why behind the what, and appreciating the complex tapestry of events and influences that have shaped our world.
Before we wrap up this fascinating discussion, I'm curious to know if there's anything else about Odisha's Buddhist legacy that you think is particularly important for our listener to understand, perhaps something that goes beyond the facts and figures.
I think it's important to emphasize that Odisha's Buddhist heritage isn't just a relic of the past. The legacy of those ancient traditions is still alive in the region today.
Oh, that's right. We talked about the Balayatra festival earlier.
Exactly. There are active Buddhist communities, vibrant festivals like Balayatra, and ongoing efforts to preserve and study these ancient sites. It's a living heritage, not just something confined to history books.
So, while those ancient temples and sculptures offer a glimpse into the past, the real legacy of Odisha's Buddhist history is the living, breathing continuation of those traditions. That's a beautiful thought.
It is, and it's a reminder that history is not static. It's a dynamic process that continues to shape and be shaped by the present.
It's incredible to think that we can still connect with these ancient stories and traditions today. It's like those ancient whispers are still echoing across the centuries, just waiting for us to listen.
I agree. It really speaks to the enduring power of culture and the deep connections that link us to the past. For anyone listening who's preparing for the UPSC exams, this deep dive into Odisha's Buddhist history is pure gold.
Absolutely. This topic has serious potential to pop up in both the prelims and the mains exams. Understand the historical context, the key figures, the art and architecture. It's all relevant.
Definitely. Imagine getting a question about the role of Odisha in the spread of Buddhism or the significance of Ratnagiri. Wouldn't it be fantastic to impress the examiners with your knowledge of Ashoka's conversion, the Bhamakara dynasty's patronage, or those unique Buddha hairstyles we talked about?
Oh, it would be like dropping a knowledge bomb. And let's not forget those maritime connections and the cultural exchange with Southeast Asia. That's crucial for understanding India's historical influence on a global scale.
It's all about connecting the dots, seeing those broader historical patterns and understanding how events in one region can ripple outward and shape the course of history.
So to our listeners prepping for the UPSC, take notes. This stuff is important. But even if you're not facing an exam, this deep dive has hopefully been a fascinating journey into a lesser-known chapter of Buddhist history. It's amazing how these recent discoveries in Odisha are challenging our understanding of the past.
They really are. It's a reminder that history is constantly being rewritten as we unearth new evidence and re-examine old assumptions. It's a humbling thought, isn't it? To realize that what we think we know can always be challenged and expanded upon.
It is. And that's what makes history so endlessly fascinating. There's always more to learn, more connections to make, and more stories to uncover. It's like an ongoing detective story, with new clues emerging all the time.
That's a great way to put it. And speaking of uncovering new clues, Odisha's story is a testament to the fact that there's always more to learn, more connections to discover, and more perspectives to consider.
Absolutely. If this deep dive has sparked your curiosity, I encourage you to do some further exploring. The Indian Express article we've been discussing is an excellent starting point, and you'll find the link in our show notes.
And remember, history isn't just about memorizing dates and names. It's about understanding the forces that have shaped our world, the connections that bind us across time and space, and the lessons we can learn from the past to create a better future.
Beautifully said. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Odisha's Buddhist secrets, I want to leave you with a final thought. What if each one of us approached history with a sense of curiosity and wonder, like explorers setting out on a grand adventure?
I love that. Imagine the discoveries we could make, the connections we could forge, and the stories we could bring to life.
It'd be like opening a window to the past, wouldn't it? And who knows what we might find on the other side.
That's the beauty of history. It's an invitation to explore, to question, and to connect. So keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep connecting.
And don't forget to like and subscribe to The Deep Dive for more journeys into the fascinating world of knowledge. We'll see you in the next Deep Dive.